Lighthouse.
Oh, where's she?
And where?
Logan City?
Thank you.
Okay, okay.
And it's called Henry's Lighthouse?
Yes, absolutely wonderful.
Huh.
Just wonderful.
We'll have to try it. So, are you the name on the door?
Yes, I
Okay.
suppose. But
That's you, it
on the
is.
door, but I'll take credit.
No, Karen Chemist Writing, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
So,
you too.
okay, you're running
For 5th Congressional District.
Is that again?
It is currently held by Kurt Schrader, who is from Canby.
Yeah.
So can you join our group?
No, unfortunately, my husband's rarely in town, and it's not overly political, so.
Well,
But I'm actually a precinct committee person, so. So we could say that perhaps I'm a little bit political.
I would say, well then should we give him two, one for him and his friend? I'm just kidding. Here is one for him, no. And you know, I
No,
think
hun, we only really need one. I'll read it to him.
this is a good year for him to get political.
Actually, you know what, when we started dating, we've known each other since we were
more
8,
right than
and I would not date him.
All finished.
Because he was a geek.
Well, the sign, I hope they put the sign down,
but
because it says,
My father.
or just right over it. So-
Yeah, you get, go right, Tom Point was because he was elected, became an elected official in Astoria. I was just the assessor's position, but his parents had totally renovated their house like 4 or 5 years earlier, right? So they were absolutely sure that there'd be some of the property taxes went up.
Was because, oh no.
I missed my baccalaureate because my uncle was running for governor. You know, yeah, so we're talking basic training. No, not basic training. My first MOS down at Monterey, California, I had to sneak into the infirmary to watch the election returns because I couldn't get anybody in the dormitories to watch it.
Well, I'll be thinking of you on May 15 and hoping you have that freedom now.
I will,
Yeah.
because he's flying out Mother's Day for Alabama again. He works out of town most of the time. So,
Well, thank you for stopping by. I see you've got dairy farmers of Oregon. I'd like to hear more about that, but
my sister owns a dairy farm, and
How's it going?
and my grandparents,
You've been keeping her straight?
as children, they keep,
Right.
you know, of course, our grandparents and our uncle. And then my parents moved down here after I graduated from high school, so of course all my children's life, you know, came down to Tillamook
Right.
to visit their grandparents.
right.
And my sister from the dairy farm. And then my mother was tragically killed in Georgia a couple of years ago. And my father wasn't really doing well with it, so we moved. You know what, I like it. Not really sure why I'm here. We have 2 offices in town. We have no clients in Oregon except for Snake River Prison, and we just got the contract for the new prison that's going into Lakeview. But, you know, yes, hon, we got the 2 prisons covered.
Well, we could ask you questions forever, so if you get a little bit of extra time, come back and join us, because
Well,
we
okay.
enjoy that.
First thing we're gonna ask you, well, I absolutely love limited government and fiscal responsibility, and just gonna throw that out there. What's your definition of security within the prison?
I'm especially directing it to Social Security and Medicare in regard to that. And they need to be protected, whatever the age is that we take, whether it's 45 or 50 or 55, whatever is decided, that those people are umbrellaed in, grandfathered in, so that they're covered with the promises given.
Well, you know, because Ross and I, he started commercial fishing when he was 9 years old. Okay, he started paying Social Security tax at the age of 9.
He has me beat. I didn't start until I was 15.
And I started when I was 15, so you and I were tied there. I did Dunes Motel in California. No one should get motel rooms either, by the way. I'm
Oh,
just
that's
gonna
what I
throw
did
that.
at 13.
I mean, it's
Probably.
hideous, isn't it? You cannot cannot
some
believe
always-
how people leave hotel rooms. But, you know, so, I mean, he's maxed out as far as, and then he became a crisis engineer for computer firms. So, I mean, you know, he's totally maxed out on Social Security every single year.
Well, a lot of Oregonians are dependent on that for their sole source of income.
Well, sure, because we've
So,
been transferred 21 times.
yeah.
And so you don't ever fully own your house because so you don't have what we think. In fact, we were just talking this, very funny, we were just talking about this not even a half an hour ago. We need to refocus.
Yep.
You know, we have about $4,000 a month we could be putting towards retirement.
Yep.
And just finally decide that, you know, because the kids are, well, we got one more time to get married this year. Which is not cheap. But, you know, you get so focused on working and depending on what your career is.
Right.
You don't stay put in a single place. We've been 40 states and 18 countries.
Wow. Now, you need to either join this group or, because we're moving on.
I'll let you guys do
Thank you so much for stopping by. So, first of all, let me apologize for being late and coming down the road, because that's not my pattern, but I gotta tell you, we got carried away. There were some wonderful and interesting questions, and I didn't do sufficient clock watching. So my husband, who is always keeping me on time, I felt the pull on the shoulder and knew that that was the time to move down the road, so.
Get the message out.
Yes, exactly. So now, you all know each other, correct?
Yes.
So, and everybody, you know everybody. Okay, so we're saying. So, absolutely. In fact, they're probably a new addition since you saw them last too.
So you thought you were supposed to be here at 6, but does the sign say 7?
Well, now it says 6.
Oh, okay.
Oh, this one.
Because I
haven't
think
changed.
the email, I think the email you sent me, I think it said 6:30.
Yeah, I believe so.
Well, and Donna said that somebody was here at 5, thinking that it was 5 to 6.
Oh.
So I don't know where they got
Did
that.
an announcement come out in the paper?
There was, I didn't check the paper.
I didn't see one, but
Harold,
But
Hey, let
the
Harold,
email
yeah.
I sent out, what time was it on the one I sent out? I can't remember.
6 to 7.
Well, 3 to 4 down south, 6 to 7.
Yeah, see, the one I got said 3:30 to 4:30 down south and 6:30 to 7:30 here.
Ah,
Who knows how that happened, but
So
it's
there may be more people showing up.
maybe. So let's us get accomplished what we want to in this
Yeah.
time period, so. One of the things that I really wanted to do was just reconnect with the places that we have been, we being Earl and me, up until this point, and then to just have an opportunity to get to see more of the coast than we did before. So I'd not been in this campaign period, for instance, down to yachts. And I found that there were some differences between the coastal cities that are very, very unique. And I think that in some areas, people have a tendency to group the valley together and to group the coast together and just assume that they're a unit. And it's really not that way, is it? And there are differences that become very apparent as we're able to talk to more and more people. And that's really important to me because as you heard, my feeling now is right in with the government of the people, by the people, for the people, and you are the people. And so we need to be sure that our communication is always there. And that's really what I'm all about, because as I kind of look down these points here, the economic prosperity for Oregon is the umbrella over the others that feed into that economic prosperity. But none of that can work without understanding from each area that is served what are the priorities. And like we were talking about at Pacific City, as we look over these points, they are huge. And there is way too much to be done in each of those areas in getting started in Congress without having the focus from each area from the people. Because it is us working together that figure out what first, where do you punch a hole in the plastic that has covered our free enterprise, for instance? Where do you start doing the first punch? Because until we are together on that, the focus is not there that is really needed. So that's my purpose in wanting to be with you again. And like Earl and I said on the way, we really don't care if there, well, we care, but we don't care in a sense if there are 4 people or if there are 400, as long as we have a good and meaningful discussion. So that's the idea, is discussion. That's what got us in trouble with Pacific City and our timing.
Actually, you have probably got the best person right here for the discussion is Gus. Gus is on top. Gus has been coming to the commission meetings for the last 12 years, and he's been on top of every subject, from ocean policy to farming to soil and water to whatever you name it. Gus has been on top of it.
This is where I take notes.
But he's keeping an eye on a lot of things that I don't know where he finds the time, because I try to keep on top of everything.
Several almost over with them right now.
Because it doesn't make any difference with the forest issue, whether it's a fishing issue, whether it's a water quality issue. Gus is on the email, Charlie, did you, were you aware of this? Were you aware of that? And so, and I like your, the only thing I would change in the presentation is we need a common language. And that's what you're coming from. You're hearing from everybody. You need a common language to send, to speak. Because Yachats is totally a different world.
Yeah.
There is no other world like Yachats. And to contrast that with Tillamook, to contrast that with
Here, Baldy.
Or
Yeah.
Lincoln City.
Lincoln City, yeah. Yeah, it's a totally different world. So and then you get to Albany, you get, we have our farming community out there. Then you get into your folks that upper crust in the, around the college, your professors. And we have that up in Manzanita as well. But typically we have our retired professors, et cetera, et cetera. I think they're pretty big. And so as I look at the map, it is a pretty diverse and it's pretty hard. But there is, what is the common language we can speak?
And, there's an interesting spin-off that we had from the last conversation on the common language, but the language we were looking for was between the urban areas and the Pacific City area where we were at the time. And we had been talking there about Agenda 21 issues. And so I said, now, in Clackamas County, where I'm from, a few people know what Agenda 21 is, but it's at this point a few. But not all, most of the voters are beginning to understand the effects of Agenda 21. So knowing that that is an issue where we were,
Right.
what then is the common language about Agenda 21 between that area of Oregon and the Clackamas area or an urban area? And we came up with talking about the land grab. Because whether you're a farmer or you're working with the ocean waters or you are just a citizen who has a small backyard, and a part of that is being claimed for the social good, you understand land grab if you've experienced it or know a neighbor who's experienced it. And so we were talking about that same thing. So I'm glad to extend that, because that, I think, is critical for communication. Otherwise, we don't know what we're addressing necessarily, except for those few who are really involved, you know? And there are a few of us who are, but that doesn't describe, you know, the whole voter population that we want to have involved.
It doesn't affect them, it's not.
Yeah, yeah. So would you talk a little bit about that common language?
Well, land grab here relates right back to overregulation. We just, every time I turn around, you know, marine reserves in the ocean, they've already tied up the ocean, keeping fishermen out, hurting the fishing industry, that's a regulation. Forestry, I'm on the County Road Advisory Committee, we can't hardly get a nickel for our roads, and we have some of the worst roads in the state. And it's federal control through regulations.
Yep.
And it's a nice, pretty bird to some, and it's a dirty bird to others. That's the spotted owl. And it just goes on and on. Farms, the farmers, the nature conservancies are buying us right up now. And now they're actually affecting the land prices of the farm. Because they come in and they're offering $10,000 an acre for a farm, when another farmer right up the road has to work to get $2,000 an acre.
The only way a person can actually buy a farm in Tillamook County today is if, for example, I just bought a farm. Sue was not very happy about that.
No family here.
Our family's also farmers.
Yeah, but it was an inheritance, and through the inheritance, I didn't want to see their conservancy buy the farm. They were offering $400,000 for the ground. I did, and they would have turned it into a duck farm. It wouldn't have been a dairy farm any further into the future. The only way you can actually look at providing, if we want to get $400,000 or a little bit, maybe $500,000 out of the farm, is we would have to sell an easement, a farming easement, where the easement is bought up by a farming community or group for half the price, and then you can have a farmer buy the other half of that up. But that only takes you one generation. So that it's basically a fix for right now, but on in the future, you know, the values are not there. But at least with the easement, it could be never used, if the value would never go beyond.
But you would give up additional land with the designation of that easement, or no?
You would, with the easement, it's an overlay on a piece of ground, that the only utilization of that ground could be is farming. So the price, what Nature Conservancy could come in supposedly and turn it into a goose farm.
And as the owner, you don't lose more of the land for farming by
No.
designating easement? Okay, and
No, that, it would be, you couldn't do anything out, you couldn't make housing out of it, you couldn't do anything other than to farm it.
other than farming.
So that's the only way I see around it.
Well, and the reason that I ask, because the word easement has, you know how some words become code words? And the word easement is becoming code in some parts of the district, where they will designate a larger easement on the farm
Right,
because of supposed watershed.
right.
And then that easement is not allowed for use
Right.
for farming or for anything except whatever is for the social good that's determined by the governmental entity that's taking the land in essence.
And when Gus was talking about the roads, one of the things that the Forest Service, I'm having a meeting with them on Monday, in the afternoon,
Federal forest.
federal forests. And we have folks that have lost direction in the Forest Service. Our different forests really are not following the mandates or the rules or the policies that are set down. They are following the green agenda. A few years ago, the forest was eaten up from the inside out. You had as many greenies come into the Forest Service as people who wanted to manage the forest. And so therefore, they have a green policy or a non-management policy. Because I don't care whether you get green policy is management, in my opinion, because you can manage for habitat, you can manage for everything. If they would follow the NEPA process that looks at the social well-being, the economic well-being of the community. And that is, in essence, is not being followed.
And this is up and down the whole coast.
This is throughout. And by not following the NEPA or the policy that they have, it is cutting into and requiring the safety net legislation. Okay, the safety net legislation, we don't really want counties, we don't want government subsidy. What we want is the management of those grounds.
And that's what we talked about earlier
Yeah.
today too. We would rather have control and be able to do, what needs to be done.
Control versus dole.
Right.
I like that. I'm sorry. I'm struggling tonight for how to communicate things to people, and you can see that, can't you?
And now, tying into what he just said, the Forest Service has a public trust of 1937 Act
Yeah.
that says the federal forests are for the economic benefit of the counties. And that was put in so that counties would not take over control of the forest. And the good intentions of the federal government was for them to be fair and sincere with the counties and let us get in there and do harvest and for renewable resources and have money for roads, safety, and fire protection.
And at that time, they didn't really feel that the counties would be able to do the management, isn't that correct?
And that's also correct.
Yeah, and so it was at its time, maybe logical, but times have changed.
That's
Is that a fair statement?
Yes, not only
No.
have they, well,
No, okay,
go ahead.
then we'll come back.
Yeah.
It's not fair because the counties can manage better than the federal forest is.
Yes,
Our forests are overgrown, they're,
right,
they're.
I understand. I've seen
There's
them
no
in place.
forage. We have problems with elk down here because there's no forage in our federal forest.
I
There's
know.
no grazing.
Now, when you came north, was the elk out in the, beside
There was
you?
there was a small, just a small herd out by the port.
Well, see, usually there's between 300 and 400 elk out there.
Whoa.
There was
that-
maybe 25 out there.
Okay, but the reason is just what,
Mhm.
And the farmers up and down in South County, they have just as big a problem. And on solid water, we've been working because they're scared to death of brucellosis and other diseases
Mhm.
that the elk transmit to the narrators. And not only that, they tear up the farmer's forage.
Mhm.
So it's a lost benefit, all kind of interrelated with the fact that that federal forest is sitting there not being managed.
Right, I understand.
Now, it's being managed by some, by the, let me say the greenies, which perhaps a bad term, but it's managed by the greenies, they just want to keep it all natural.
Mhm.
And they want to ignore the fact that the county has set up dependency on that for our road funding.
Right.
And they just want to ignore it.
Right.
Now they're going the next step. Federal Forest is working with local conservation groups, and they're tying up huge chunks of stewardship land,
Right.
which are more permanent set-asides.
Mhm.
That's going to be more land that we won't have available
Mhm. Mhm.
for renewable resources.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's, I wanted to add that to what Chuck was saying.
Mhm.
The acts are there. Now, in 1993, they wrote the Conservation Act. which gives them the power to do these stewardship projects. So that's the case of the government back in the White Ivory Tower, telling us what we're going to do, and I don't have a problem.
Well,
I don't have a, as long as they come to the people. Now, collaboration and coordination, they're doing this on their own. They don't come to us.
Right.
So would you like to see the 93 Act repealed? Is that what you're saying?
No.
well, actually, if I was to do anything, I would give the courts less credence in stopping, the lawsuits that's tied up the forests. The lawsuits are what has really tied the forest, the management people. The folks who are trying to harvest, put together a timber sale or management plan, just to, for example, with the Whopper, with the BLM. Okay, that management plan was probably the most sophisticated plan that I've ever seen in my life. It was, the state of Oregon before that time was heads and shoulders above anything that was ever developed. Okay, the Whopper was head and shoulders above the Oregon plan. Now, it was.
If I may interrupt, back to Earl's question about 93, the Whopper was very amenable to the local people because it would collaborate and coordinate good stewardship with economic and social resources. So that's why I could say, we're not against conservation,
Right.
Right.
but we want it to be fair and we want to be a partner with economic and social resources.
Yeah.
That-
And that's only right. Now, the lawsuit question ties in with both of these, I think,
Both of these.
in that, who are those lawsuits against? Is it the private industry, or is it
It's
the county,
typically
or
the
is it the
federal.
state? It's by the
usually-
feds, right?
No, it's by the environmental groups.
By environmental groups against the feds?
Right. And,
Really? Not against the state?
well, there's one against the state right now, but typically what has been historically the pattern is environmental groups against the feds to stop management. And
Does it, and the effect of that is what? Is it that it ties it up, but does it dissuade the feds from moving those lands the way they could and should?
yeah, it
That's
stops.
the result.
The result is not.
Hi.
Good.
Hey, good to see you. How are you?
Good.
Come join us.
But that's the effect, is a non-management.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But now,
They'll even attack the sales. If you're fortunate enough to get a sale, then they will put a lawsuit against that sale.
Okay.
They just get you.
we're talking about what specifically is tying up the movement of the forest lands. That's, and so we were talking here about the lawsuits that are kind of,
But the state won't.
No.
really?
Okay, the Forest Service, in its wisdom, years ago, when they wrote up their 10-year plan, they wrote it up in a fashion that they tied all timber sales together in one commonality. BLM, as they wrote up their plan years ago, each timber sale stood on its own. So all they had to do, the enviros, was to, one lawsuit tied up the whole Forest Service. Okay, all the sales. With BLM, it was a much harder cat to skin because they had to put a lawsuit against each timber sale. So what the BLM has been doing is following the path of the Forest Service. Their last plan was tied everything together rather than being individualized, and that was the wrong avenue or the wrong way to go.
So the challenge here, in my eyes, is the Equal Access to Justice Act. The Equal Access to Justice Act, that was set up so beautifully so that when a person was caught, let's say, unreliably sued that person could go and get money and file a lawsuit to protect his own property. Unfortunately, Congress left in a great big loophole that the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, they get that money. So they take our money out of our pocket, they sue us at our cost, we have to spend cost to defend ourselves, and then if they win a monetary sum, they get the money. So they get money from us 3 times on the Equal Access to Justice Act.
Isn't that ironic, given the name?
Isn't that ironic? The best intentions in the world. So we need to plug that here. That's what Charlie and everybody's been talking about, is we need to plug that gap, and that NGOs, non-governmental conservation groups, all these foundations, let them pay for their lawsuits like those of us who can afford it pay for our lawsuits.
Well, one of the things that, and I may have mentioned it to them, but I'd like to restate, is that as we look at all of the things that need to be done in Congress to get Oregon back to prosperity, and that's the kind of the focus here. There are so many of those things, which ones need to be done first? And that's where I believe that it's the discussion like this that focuses us to getting to the right things, because we've got to make progress in the right direction. And there's, with so much to be done, where in the world do you start? So that's kind of the focus here. And it's,
That would be one good start.
see, it sounds to me like this kind of thing is doable. What if?
A lot of things are doable, but too many of the times, our folks get back to Washington DC and they find an ulterior motive in
I know,
Washington DC.
I know, I know.
Their pockets full of money.
I know, I know. And this is a really hard thing about how we go about the process of elections. And the campaigning has got to be a whole lot different than serving. This campaigning stuff is really crazy. It's
It's
just,
hard to concentrate.
it is some strange process. And